All right, well, this is my office here at the Scott Foundation. We try and spend as little time as we possibly can in here, but, it's a perfect blend between the wild and regular people. That way, when I get new chickens, I can have them right here in my office and keep a little eye on them, doing whatever we're doing, and until they're ready to go outside and be big kids. Hi, I'm Chef Brett Vibber. I'm the chef and owner of Wild Arizona Cuisine. I'm also the culinary director for the Scott Foundation's Wild Kids Culinary Academy. Got into the culinary field or interested in cooking from my mom, my grandma, even PBS in the 80s with the cooking shows that were kind of original cooking shows before the whole trend of the Food Network came about. That food always is interested in me, and whether it's tying to culture or family or both at the same time. This has all been a lifelong process for me. It started with my dad. It progressed into Boy Scouts. It progressed into self-education. It progressed, as my cooking career took off as well, and different parts of the state. And I started cooking in Tempe, and I went to Flagstaff for a year, and I went to Tucson for college. But all the time I was cooking, and all the time camping and outdoors and wild food has been part of my life. That no matter what I've been doing wherever I am, it's been part of every restaurant. Even, unbeknownst to me, when I went to Italy to get into Italian food and find my way in that world, that, there's so much wild food over there that they don't even think about it that way. You pick bay leaves on your way to the restaurant. You pick lavender on your way to the restaurant. You pick up, basil from the guy at the market on your way to the restaurant, but it's not a trend there. It's just a way of life. And I always thought that was really nice. So this is a much older plant. This is probably one of the first ones of the spring. It's probably going to have a big shoot that'll be, it gets more and more fibrous as it goes down and down. So it's just like an onion or a leek, you see. And the further you get down into it, the older you let it get, the more the fibrous gets closer to the center. So even onions and leeks do the same thing. What makes Arizona perfect for foraging and unique for foraging is that we're definitively split in half. For the most part, we're split by the Sonoran Desert, we're split by the Colorado Plateau. So you see the Colorado Plateau is the Rocky Mountains, and so anything you would find pushing up through the Rocky Mountains and through that geography exists all the way south of Flagstaff into Arizona. And then we have the Sonoran Desert. So not only do we find those things in the forest of, grapes, raspberries, dewberries, mushrooms, and a number of different kinds of mushrooms, fiddlehead ferns, acorns, whatever it may be up that way, we have something that's unique to us that no one else in the world has, is the Sonoran Desert. So I have saguaro fruits, I have barrel cactus fruits, I have a number of different kinds of prickly pear, palo verde, mesquite, watercrest, mint. The list goes on for hours and hours and hours. Our desert's so unique with being full of flora and fauna, and we don't often think of that because we might not be able to see it right on the surface. But I always tell people it's a rainstorm away. It's a rainstorm away of watch the desert the day before it rains and watch the desert 2 days after, a day after it rains. Everything explodes. I mean, you see deer, you see rabbit, you see raccoons, you see skunks. Because you see flowers bloom, you see grass blossom. The desert doesn't follow these cycles of this is what happens in spring, fall, winter, summer. It doesn't happen that way. It happens when it rains. I think it's important for everyone to know the history and the story of the food that they're eating, because this isn't all about me. I'm one step in the process. In my humble opinion, I'm not the biggest part of the process. Someone had to decide to plant that plant. Whether it was nature or a farmer, that plant had to decide to be grown. The conditions had to be perfect. The water, the fertilizer, the soil, the weather, the temperature, everything had to be perfect for that plant to grow. It doesn't make sense, again, like to order green beans off of the back of a Cisco truck. You don't have that story anymore. I don't care what you do to it once it comes into your restaurant. You don't have that story prior to that, and that doesn't make sense. It seems to be half of a book to me. half of a movie, half of a story. It doesn't make sense to not know the background story. I used to be so upset watching movies and not know the background story. I had to wait 30 years to find out how Han Solo grew up. You know, it doesn't. I hate that. Where I want I want the whole story, and I don't want people to have to wait 30 years to know the whole story. So it's just as important from the person that planted it as the person that eats it. It's a whole story. You don't want bits and parts of it. And I'd feel no honor in leaving someone out. I think foraging wild food is hard to do, and I think we've become lazy as a society. I think 100 years ago, you go back 100 years ago, you go back 300 years ago, and it was a part of your daily life, either farming, foraging, hunting, fishing, to survive and to possess those kinds of skills where we've, watered down our, needs for those kinds of things in most people's eyes, that they become forgotten skills. And I think it gives me a better connection to the food, the story that the food can tell, the customers that are enjoying the food, and everyone we work with. It just becomes that story again of more than just a dinner and what you're having for dinner, but an experience, a story, and participating in culture that, is historic Arizona, present Arizona, future Arizona, that it's all evolving. We're seeing this big explosion again of young farmers and young ranchers in Arizona, and that to me just is huge, that another generation's picking it up in their own way. But where there's one, there's others. So here, usually from here, let's see how clean it is inside, and you can tell here that it's old, not only because it's dry, but that's where bugs access it from underneath. It's not as dry as I would think it would be for right here, right now, but you can see it's a bit dry. You want a nice soft mushroom. They're real dry on the edges. You can see a lot of bugs have gotten into that. It's not something I'd probably be interested in keeping. My advice to people that are trying to be more self-reliant, trying to be, whether it's more farming or gardening or foraging or hunting or raising your own livestock for cheese or meat or whatever it may be, is don't put all of your focus on one person. Don't try and learn all from this guy or this guy or this guy. It's got to be the same approach as, I even took to cooking, is I want to work for 50 chefs before I decide my own way. I want to see the good and the bad and the different. If you just work for one chef for 10 or 15 years and just work up through him or her, you only know one way of doing things. So I think my advice to people is be a student of the game. Be constantly learning, constantly seek out different people that can help you attain that, whether it's in person or it's a video or it's a seminar or a workshop that you go to. Constantly reach out to different people. Even being an Arizona native, I spent a lot of time outside of Arizona where, coming back to Arizona, I was, friends with the previous owners of Cartwrights, and to kind of break back in and build a rapport and build a reputation, that was the place for me to go. They were already celebrating Arizona cuisine, but perhaps to me in too narrow of a scope, where it was just kind of Arizona ranching history cuisine, where I try and see not only through that scope, but a much broader scope again of what were the natives doing, and how do we bring all that together? How do we bring our experiences and Japanese cuisine, Italian cuisine, and being in Chicago, being in LA, being in Panama? How do we bring all that together and see it through the scope of Arizona food? So Cartwright's, when the option presented itself to purchase the restaurant, I wanted to go for that. I wanted to do that. I wanted to take that next step, and the idea, unbeknownst to a lot of people, was to not keep Cartwrights open forever, was to build it back up and push forward the new concept and see how people responded to it, and the idea has been planted here for a long time, that when the Scott Foundation moved forward with this, whether it was Cartwrights or not, that restaurant was going to move to a smaller place where we could be more intimate with our guests. And that's really it at the end of the day, is 185 seats, versus 45 or 50 seats is much different for how I can interact with my guest. I know I know servers and hostesses in front of the house are traditionally used to interacting with the guest, but I want to interact with every guest as well, and I want to make sure they know the story and they know how important it was that each bite that they had, whether we caught the fish or we found the mushroom or we found the cattails or we milled the acorn flour, or we turned the tepary beans into miso after we picked the tepary beans. It's you don't want to be behind closed doors watching that story hopefully be passed the right way. Hey, I'm Chef Brett Vibber, and I want to make a dish that's super uniquely Arizona. We want to take advantage of what wild foods we can right now in the late summer and early fall and celebrate, wild mushrooms, wild onions, and wild acorns. Come back to the gardens and see what we have, growing on our own properties as well, and just really create a dish that's super special to our region. The Scott Foundation in general is there to provide an alternative to foster kids in Arizona. It's to break the victim role and to create a victory role. It's about what are you going to do when you age out of this program? What are you going to do as you're a young adult? What trades are you looking into? And where can we help give you life experience and not guide but support their needs and support their wants and their goals and their desires and just nurture that. It's not to change and direct a young person as to where their future needs to go. The future of the Scott Foundation, the ultimate goal is that we create a boutique hotel. On the front side, that's the business model, and what'll be our outlet for the new restaurant and all the things that we want to do with farming and ranching and foraging on our own properties. But at the same time, it allows for kids in the foundation to have a scholarship and live on the property, learn a trade, whether they're in high school still or out of high school, that they can enroll in our master class program, and whether it's foraging program or farming programs or culinary programs or any other aspect of the hospitality program, is they're getting on the job training at the same time that they're getting room and board accounted for them as well. That it just becomes a grand idea of how do we help the kids even more? How do we break the system of all the terrible fallacies that are involved in not just the Arizona foster system, but the foster system across the country. All right, I've got a spruce tip vinegar here. We tend to collect spruce tips wherever we are in the world, actually, to be honest. We spend a bit of time up in the Pacific Northwest over the course of each year, and some of these come from Colorado, some come from northern Arizona, central Arizona, so real good foresty flavor. Again, the smell is just unreal and unlike really anything you could find or replicate or be told to buy in a store. The roles are many. It's one, keeping a nonprofit going and making sure there's enough money to support as many kids as we want to every year. It's also about expanding and what kind of different cooking classes and foraging classes and self-reliance classes I can teach these kids through wild foods and survival and kind of that outside of the kitchen stuff where I sort of thrive as well, are I think vital assets for a person, not just these young people but every person to possess. But it's sometimes easier to approach young people about it than older people, and so my role is to again continue to grow and evolve with the foundation, and so that ultimate goal is again to put wild on that hotel's property and create an educational center where we can talk about foraging, we can talk about farming, we can talk about cheese making, we can talk about all the things that I've always wanted to do culinary wise in one spot, and you're bringing all these satellite projects kind of together as one in one location. All right, I'm gonna get this plate put together. I think it's important that the plate speaks for itself as well, that it's celebrating what we have, and we have an abundance of some of these things right now, and to almost make it look like where you found these mushrooms, where you found these acorns is a huge part to me in honoring the food, and making sure it's presented in a way that is sophisticated and also honorable to those who help so much to prepare it for us. When Wild opens, it'll be, for me, not just a feather in the cap, but a testament of how we want our life to be. With it being a bit smaller, a lot smaller than Cartwright's, that it it becomes a place where not only do you feel like family coming in, but you feel like you've either stepped back in time, or you've stepped into the forest, or you've stepped into the desert with us, and you can close your eyes and imagine where that dish was picked, and with the flavors and the essences of the dishes that that I can transpire and transcend you to a different place with food, and it becomes so much different than just something you were hungry for. Being hungry and being nourished is different to me. So I want to have a conversation with you while you sit down and have dinner. I want to have a conversation with you through the food. I want the food to tell a story. I want you to know a lot more about Arizona and its past before you leave my doors. I think I try and live my life by two different mottos, if you will. One's from my dad and one's from Boy Scouts, and Boy Scout motto is be prepared. It's fairly vague, but by being vague it's fairly generalized as well, as to be prepared. Be prepared for what? Everything. Be prepared for everything. I'm in my work, my forage, my personal life, my family life. Be prepared. Be prepared for anything. And from my dad I learned, make all the mistakes you want, but don't repeat any of them. That's it.